You're still lying there, warm beneath a blanket of starlight and silence, when something curious happens behind your eyes. A flicker faint, golden, like the echo of an idea before it even has words. It floats through the mind's quiet corridors and disappears again. You don't chase it. You let it return when it's ready. This, oddly enough, is exactly how Albert Einstein said his ideas arrived. Not with a shout, not with caffeine-fueled whiteboards and intense all-nighters, but in the foggy margin between sleep and waking, the liminal borderlands, the dream-place. Einstein often spoke about what he called visual thought experiments. These weren't just imagination games. They were entire immersive dreams that happened inside his head. As a teenager, he used to picture himself riding alongside a beam of light, floating next to it in space, and wondering, what would I see? What would the world look like? Would time freeze? Would color vanish? You too, try this now. Imagine yourself lifting off your bed and drifting toward a speeding ray of sunlight. You match its speed, inch by inch, until you're surfing on it like a photon, weightless and wild. Below you, the earth blurs into silence. Around you, time changes. It no longer ticks like a clock. It melts. That immediately dreamlike is the seed from which Einstein's theory of special relativity grew. He didn't arrive at it with equations first. He dreamed it. He felt the physics long before he could prove it. His brain, unlike most, treated logic and intuition as equals. Historians still argue whether this fusion of intuition and science is what set Einstein apart from his contemporaries. Some suggest he was a rare blend, half mystic, half mathematician. Others say his ability to dwell in that dreamy zone where rules could be bent and remade was simply what made genius look easy. There's something fringe, too, worth mentioning. A few modern neurologists believe that Einstein may have had an unusually high level of theta brainwave activity, the kind most active during REM sleep and deep meditation. It's never been proven, of course, but some think his altered sleep cycles, daydreaming tendencies, and mental imagery were neurological superpowers. Or maybe he was just good at napping. You decide. In his later years, Einstein admitted that many of his breakthroughs came not in the lab, but in bed, or on walks, or while lounging with a violin across his lap, fingers idly plucking notes while his mind soared. He called these moments his combinatory play, where the subconscious took control, and connections clicked into place without effort. There's a journal entry from 1922 that reads almost like a poem. I see the puzzle's edge clearly. Now, the center will come later, perhaps in the night. He trusted sleep that much, trusted that his brain, even while dreaming, was doing sacred geometry behind the scenes. And then there's the dreams themselves. Einstein, surprisingly, wasn't very public about his actual nighttime visions, but his letters especially to friends like Michel Besso hint at strange dreams, spinning stars, melting cities, conversations with his childhood self, watching, as future generations whispered his name like a spell. Once, he described dreaming of a clock that ran backward, powered by silence. Whether this was metaphor or memory, who knows? But it's poetic, isn't it? You can almost see the dream silver gears ticking in reverse, seconds flowing uphill like fish. Einstein also believed that the unconscious mind often solved problems before the conscious mind even understood them. That's why he didn't force ideas. He'd start with a question, ponder it gently, and then sleep on it. Literally, sometimes for days, like sourdough rising in a warm bowl. And you You're doing something similar now, floating gently through thought, not quite trying to solve anything, but letting curiosity breathe. If Einstein were beside you, he might whisper, "Good. Don't chase the answer. Let it come to you." Here's a quirky one. Einstein used to sit in armchairs holding small metal bowls or spoons between his fingers while resting his hand just above the floor. As he drifted into sleep, his grip would relax, the objects would fall, and the sound would jolt him awake right at the edge of unconsciousness. That's where he believed the best ideas lived, between waking and dreaming. Modern sleep researchers call this the hypnagogic state, that drowsy phase where hallucinations, memories, and wild thoughts blur together. Salvador Dali used the same spoon drop trick to dream up melting clocks. Thomas Edison did it too, nodding off with steel balls in his fists. But Einstein, he might have mastered it, so maybe you try it, mentally at least. Imagine holding something delicate. Feel yourself letting go, just a little. That sweet, lazy descent. Somewhere in that descent, your best thoughts are waiting, and now without effort, without even noticing you're deeper into this journey, the clock stick has softened. Your body's a little heavier, and your mind, maybe it's beginning to shine just a bit. You're floating now, not in space exactly, but in that cozy middle layer between awareness and slumber. The hum of reality has quieted. Somewhere behind your closed eyes, images begin to form, not quite memories, not quite fiction. They just exist. A train station, a ticking clock, a single beam of light, slicing the dusk like a whisper. Welcome to Einstein's most legendary dreamscape. He called them Gedanken experiments, or thought experiments. But don't let the German make it sound stiff. These were dreams, lucid, cinematic, sometimes feverish mental playgrounds, where he'd bend the rules of time and space like warm taffy. Imagine this one. You're standing on a platform, and a train rushes past at near the speed of light. As it zooms by, you watch the light from a flashbulb on the train reflect back and forth between two mirrors. But now here's the twist: it bounces differently for you than it does for someone on the train. It's a weird, mind-bending moment. From your sleepy platform perspective, time seems to slow down aboard the train. Not metaphorically, literally. That's special relativity for you. The faster you move, the slower time ticks. It's not science, it's physics. And it all began inside Einstein's brain while he was doing what you're doing right now, floating and visualizing. Eyes closed, mouth slightly open, caught in a strange, weightless thought. Historians still argue whether these thought experiments were born in actual sleep or in those nap-adjacent reveries. Some scholars claim he never really slept like the rest of us. He was always, in some way, halfway dreaming, thinking in images, feeling ideas before he wrote them down. There's even a theory, quirky, but not totally implausible, that Einstein's dreams came to him with the emotional intensity of real-life experiences, as if he had felt time slow down, as if he had, in some phantom dimension, ridden the light beam himself. Now, you lie there and picture it. You're no longer in your bedroom or wherever this story caught you. You're on a sleek, impossible train with no conductor and no destination, slicing through stars like butter. The windows shimmer. The seats are empty except yours. Outside, the galaxies bend, and inside, your watch has stopped ticking. But not for everyone. Just for you, the dreamer. Even as Einstein's ideas grew more complex, he never stopped using these dreamy metaphors. His later work involved elevators floating in space and astronauts dropping inside shafts of gravity, all imagined in perfect, dreamy detail before the math was ever written. And yes, sometimes the math didn't come. Sometimes the imagery was just too far ahead of what equations could capture. Einstein once confessed that some visions were so vivid they haunted him for years before he could prove or disprove them. He didn't panic, he waited. Like a good dreamer, he knew not everything can be controlled. Sometimes the mind needs to float, and float he did, for hours, days. While others scribbled and fussed, Einstein wondered. His colleagues, like Max Born and Ehrenfest, were used to him falling silent in meetings, staring off into nothing, and then mumbling something like, "But what if the clock is falling with the observer?" That kind of line, muttered almost to himself, could detonate an entire century of physics. Even now, scientists use versions of his thought experiments to teach modern students. But let's be honest, none of those PowerPoints or chalkboard lectures capture the warmth, the surreality, the softness of those original dreams. They've become formulas. Einstein saw movies. Here's a quirky tidbit you might like. Einstein often imagined the point of view of non-human observers. A bug on a mirror, a person inside a windowless elevator, a photon zooming through nothingness. It's as if he wanted to think outside his own consciousness, to dream like someone or something else. Can you do that? Tonight, as your mind quiets, picture yourself as a particle, not metaphorically, actually become one, a glint of energy zipping across vacuum, no body, no breath, just light in motion. Now slow that light down. Watch as the universe snaps into form around you, time color. Matter all blooming like frost across glass. See what Einstein was getting at. Historians still wonder if these kinds of visions were signs of something more than intelligence. Not just logic, but a rare emotional intuition, someone who felt space, rather than merely measured it. After all, there's a reason people say Einstein never truly grew up. He didn't stop playing, he just changed his toys. And now you're lying back, eyes closed, and the train is moving again. Not real, not fake, somewhere between. In this dream world, clocks don't tick, they whisper. Lights don't flicker, they dance, and you're just along for the ride. The train slows. Or maybe you're the one speeding up, it's hard to tell anymore. Time, in this dreamy Einsteinian universe, doesn't obey your usual rules. You're still wrapped in the warmth of your bed or couch, wherever you're listening from, but mentally, you're orbiting something bigger, something older than stars and stranger than logic. A theory that bent the universe and never bothered to say, sorry. General relativity wasn't born in a lab. It wasn't even born during a sleepless night of scribbling equations. It arrived the way thunder sometimes rolls in after long, quiet hours when nothing happens. Einstein had been thinking about gravity not just as a force, but as geometry. What if gravity wasn't something objects did to each other, but something space-time itself was? That idea sounds clean now. Back then, it was madness. But of course, you're not thinking about formulas. You're picturing yourself standing on a giant trampoline. There's a bowling ball in the middle, maybe painted like Jupiter for style. You drop a marble near it, and instead of rolling straight, it spirals inward, caught in the curve. That's gravity, says Einstein. That's space telling matter how to move, and matter telling space how to bend. And somewhere, across the decades, the fabric of everything puckers just slightly under your weight. Now imagine dreaming that, not picturing it from above like a science fair exhibit, but feeling it. Einstein described moments where he could sense the shape of space, like he was running his hands across an invisible map, not just seeing or theorizing, but experiencing gravity as a softness, a distortion, a living field. Historians still argue whether he came up with the core insight in a single flash or over long, slow months of walks, naps, and gut feelings he couldn't quite put into words. He once said the idea felt like something already known that had only just been remembered. Einstein trusted those feelings. He didn't rush the math. He gave it space to arrive in its own time, which is probably a cosmic joke, considering he was redefining what time was, and while he worked, he walked. A lot, through Berlin parks, through Princeton's quiet streets, always thinking, often silent. Some said he looked distracted, others said he looked enchanted. One old colleague joked that Einstein could walk past a marching band and not hear the trumpets, he was too busy calculating curvature. Another quipped, he's not in the world, he's just passing through. But he wasn't above the world either. He liked small things, warm bread, a cracked joke, comfortable socks, simple meals. He didn't need a lavish study. Most of his thinking was done with chalk, with paper, and with his own imagination, as wild and vast as any dreamscape you've ever tiptoed through. Quirky detail, Einstein reportedly wore shoes without socks because they felt too tight for thought. Let that image stick with you. The man unraveling the structure of the cosmos needed his toes to breathe. Somewhere, that's poetry. And if the mathematics of relativity felt abstract to the public, Einstein worked hard to keep it human. He described gravity not as a punishment, but as a hugger, pulling, a closeness. Like the universe didn't want to lose you, so it bent itself to keep you near. He wanted people to feel it in their bones, even if they couldn't prove it in numbers. Here's where you might start to feel it, too. Imagine lying on a curved sheet of space-time. It's soft beneath you, like memory foam, but infinite. You shift, and the sheet shifts with you. Every move you make echoes through the structure. You're part of it. You are it. That was the realization. Nothing is isolated. Everything pulls on everything. Even light, which was once thought to be untouchable, bends around stars like it's taking the scenic route. In 1919, during a total solar eclipse, astronomers proved Einstein right. Light really did curve. The headlines screamed it. Einstein defies Newton. The quiet dreamer had overturned the old gods. It made him famous. Reluctantly, uneasily famous. And here's where things shift again. Because, despite the medals, the fame, the cameras, Einstein never let go of his dreamy thinking. He didn't trade the quiet mind for celebrity. He just smiled at it, shuffled through it, and went home to nap after interviews. Historians still argue whether general relativity was his final act of creative genius or merely the most visible one. But in private, Einstein believed the next idea was always waiting, lurking at the edge of sleep, at the border of imagination. That's where he turned again and again. So tonight, as you drift deeper, imagine a man curled in his armchair, pipe smoke, curling eyes half closed, and somewhere inside that sleepy skull, space is folding and stars are whispering, and you're right there beside him, an invisible guest in his dreams, lying quietly on a universe that curves like a sigh. You floated this far past trains and trampolines, clocks and light beams. Now you find yourself somewhere quieter, not quite a dream, not quite awake, a warm, strange little space, cozy, cluttered, and smelling faintly of old wool and pipe. Tobacco, welcome to Einstein's bedroom, not the grand study you might imagine. No wall-sized chalkboards filled with swirling equations. Just a simple room with creaky floorboards, stacks of books, and, in the corner, the most powerful piece of furniture in theoretical physics, a bed. Einstein's bed was his launchpad, his lab bench, his favorite tool. He loved sleeping, worshipped it, almost. And no, not in the way you might think. He wasn't lazy. He was strategic. Einstein believed that sleep didn't steal time from thinking. It was thinking, just done differently. He reportedly slept 10 hours a night, more than most adults, and regularly napped during the day. His reasoning: the mind does its best work when it's not trying too hard. When the conscious effort is turned off, the subconscious can finally speak. And you are proving that right now. You're not trying to solve the mysteries of the cosmos, yet your thoughts are drifting toward them anyway. Historians still debate whether Einstein's long sleep habits were a byproduct of creative genius or just eccentricity. But to him, it wasn't indulgence. It was essential maintenance, like oiling a telescope or tuning a violin. The dream state wasn't a break from his work. It was the work. He often said, a calm and modest life brings more happiness than the pursuit of success combined with constant restlessness. There's a fringe theory that Einstein's brain processed information differently because of his sleep architecture. Some neuroscientists suggest he may have spent more time in REM sleep, the phase associated with dreaming and memory processing. One hypothesis even claims his corpus callosum, bridge between the two brain hemispheres, was unusually thick, allowing for faster integration between rational and imaginative thought. Of course, we can't know for sure, but still intriguing. His routine was charmingly consistent. Wake around 8 a.m. coffee, a short walk, light work, then lunch, something simple, usually vegetarian, and then nap time, a solid hour, sometimes 2, and these weren't just lazy sprawls. Einstein treated them like rituals. Coat off, shoes kicked under the chair, face toward the window, letting the hum of the world lull him into that sweet, hypnagogic drop. The same state Edison and Dolly chased with steel balls and silver spoons. Einstein didn't need props. He could drop into a dream like a pebble into water. Even when traveling, giving lectures, accepting awards, ducking into the glare of photographers, he prioritized sleep. Once, during a packed tour in Japan, he refused to shorten his nap schedule. Not for royalty, not even for scientists begging to talk relativity over tea. They can wait, he said. My ideas arrive while I'm asleep. There's something wonderfully rebellious about that, isn't there? The most celebrated genius of the 20th century choosing sleep over meetings. That's a kind of resistance most of us only dream of. Literally, you picture him now, bundled beneath a wool blanket, hair already wild even in slumber, maybe murmuring numbers in his sleep. Or perhaps dreaming not in numbers at all, but in images: falling stars, flying mirrors, shifting clocks. He once described dreaming of standing under a sky of equations, raining down like snow. His wife Elsa said he sometimes spoke in his sleep, half German, half math, mumbling like he was having a polite argument with the universe. And who knows, maybe he was. Quirky side note: Einstein famously claimed he never wore a watch. He didn't need one, he said. Time was relative. Besides, he had a rhythm of his own, one measured not in minutes, but in ideas. and dreams. He even joked that he came up with relativity because he was a very slow thinker, and so he needed lots of time to let things soak in. That humility, it's disarming. It's hard to picture any modern physicist calling themselves slow, but Einstein wore it like a badge of honor. He wasn't in a hurry. He let his brain wander, meander, nap its way through the cosmos, and you're following the same trail, whether you realize it or not, lying still, drifting gently, letting your thoughts expand like stars across soft black sky. Maybe that's the lesson tonight. The most powerful mind of the modern age didn't live by urgency. He lived by stillness. He let the universe arrive in its own time. And it did. So let your thoughts take their time, too. Let them wander, let them dream. Einstein would approve. Hey guys, tonight we're curling into the messy, brilliant corners of a mind that changed everything. Your mattress is now floating somewhere between a sleepy German village and the glimmering folds of curved space-time. You're under a blanket, but somewhere in your imagination, a chalkboard is lighting up with symbols no one else quite understands. The stars blink above you like questions. Somewhere, a pipe smolders in the dark. This is the world of Albert Einstein, not just the physics, prodigy or reluctant celebrity, but the slow walker, the napper, the dreamer, the man who once claimed he owed his success not to talent, but to being passionately curious and well-rested. And yes, you probably won't survive this intellectual nap battle if you're skimping on your sleep schedule. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is there now. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You might expect Einstein's brain to be fueled by intense study, endless coffee, and insomnia-fueled equations scribbled in candlelight. But no, P was famously pro-sleep, 10 hours a night, sometimes more. Add in a nap, usually on a sofa or in a sunlit chair, and you've got a man who probably spent a third of his life horizontal. This wasn't laziness, it was strategy. He called sleep an investment, and joked that genius was mostly about staying rested enough to notice when ideas floated by. You imagine his bed not some grand scientist's laboratory, but a modest frame with rumpled sheets. Maybe there's a cat sleeping at the foot, purring faintly. A violin leans against the wall. On the bedside table, a pile of letters, maybe a notebook, and definitely a small wooden pipe. You lie back in this imaginary bed now, letting the quiet of his world blur into yours. Here's the thing, Einstein believed that mental clarity required idleness. Not just downtime, but intentional, unapologetic nothingness. He'd wake slowly, often around 8 or 9 in the morning, shuffle in wool slippers to a simple breakfast of eggs, toast, and tea, and then just think. Hours of thinking, not writing, not reading, thinking. His mind was his real laboratory, and sleep was its nightly reset button. Historians still argue whether his dedication to sleep was instinct or calculated routine. One theory suggests that the brain's glymphatic self-cleaning fluid wash was part of what gave him an edge. The idea's modern, but maybe Einstein intuitively understood the need to empty the mental trash. Each night before setting fire to the universe with his next idea. And then there are the fringe theories. One popular rumor claims Einstein believed dreams were a form of higher dimensional communication, a kind of subconscious quantum signal. While there's no direct evidence of him saying this, Some suggest he hinted at the brain's mysterious powers during conversations with Carl Jung, who was deeply into dream symbolism and the collective unconscious. Whether Einstein entertained these ideas or just nodded politely while filing them under interesting but unprovable, we may never know. But we do know this: he was vocal about sleep's importance. When asked what helped him solve the puzzle of relativity, he replied, "I just stayed with the problem longer." But how? The secret might lie in something you're doing right now: laying still, letting your mind wander just enough to make unusual connections. In one old photo, Einstein is curled in a chair, socks off, legs drawn up like a boy with no homework. His head rests against the winged cushion, eyes closed, fingers laced over his belly. It's afternoon, maybe 2 or 3. Outside, the sun warms the cobbled road. Inside, the dreamer dreams again. Sometimes he'd fall asleep mid-sentence. There's a story, half verified, half apocryphal, of Einstein dozing during a university lecture he was giving. Mid-rant about mass energy equivalence, he simply stopped talking and stared out the window. When a student coughed nervously, Einstein smiled and said, "Just giving the universe a chance to answer back." That soft laughter moment, that's who he was. Never in a rush, unafraid of silence. You picture yourself now walking beside him through Princeton, past tidy hedges and spring rain on slate sidewalks. You say something, he doesn't answer, just walks. Later, you find he was turning your question over for hours, dissecting it, dreaming it, letting it swirl in the soup of slow thought. Even his family knew not to interrupt his rest. His stepdaughter Margot once said that when he was thinking, he looked like he was sleeping. To be in Einstein's presence often meant watching a man deep in apparent nothingness, face slack, eyes half-lidded, drifting, yet fully awake, inside. And as you breathe slowly now, maybe you can feel a little of that, how strange and sacred idleness can be. No alarms, no screens, just you and the soft hum of your thoughts finding shape. There's a gentle knocking in your mind now, a kind of cosmic tapping, not urgent, just steady, familiar. That's memory calling. And in Einstein's world, memory isn't a dusty shelf of old facts. It's a time machine, a looping, skipping, never quite linear force, just like time itself. Because here's the thing, when Einstein dreamed, he didn't just explore space. He rewrote time, gently, like a violinist retuning the strings of the universe. You already know, he bent time in his theories, especially in special relativity. That clocks tick slower the faster you move. That time stretches and shrinks, depending on speed and gravity. But what's often forgotten is why he was so drawn to time in the first place. It wasn't just physics, it was personal. When Einstein was just 12, he had what he called a second wonder. The first was a compass, mysterious, magical, but the second, a geometry book. He called it his holy little geometry book, like it was a sacred text. He didn't read it the way a student reads. He experienced it. Time dissolved while he turned its pages. He said it felt like the world had stopped. And maybe that's when it started, the obsession. Not with equations, but with moments. With how long they last. How they change. How they vanish. Historians still argue whether his obsession with time was sparked by grief, by awe, or just by the sheer strangeness of it. But they all agree. Einstein didn't see time the way others did. He called it a stubborn illusion, a trick, a mask the universe wears. And yet, he loved it anyway. He once wrote a letter to the widow of his closest friend, Michelle Besso. It said, Now he has departed from this strange world a little ahead of me. That means nothing. People, like us, know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. That's not cold logic. That's love. That's time as something tender. A ribbon, not a line. In Einstein's sleepier moments, he imagined clocks ticking slower near black holes. He thought about twins aging differently depending on how fast they travel. He didn't invent these ideas to sound clever. He imagined them because they felt right. Because time, to him, had moods. It stretched when you waited. It vanished when you played the violin. It paused in grief. Quirky detail. Einstein reportedly couldn't remember birthdays. Not even his own. He said he found them arbitrary and unimportant. But he could remember the moment he first saw Maxwell's equations in his teens perfectly, down to the smell of the page and the angle of light. That's how his memory worked. Not in dates, in experiences, in feelings, and you might relate to that more than you think. Have you ever dreamed a whole day, only to wake up and realize it's been 3 minutes? Ever sat on a beach, and suddenly the sun is gone and it's dusk, and you swear it was noon? 5 minutes ago. That's not just imagination. That's the elasticity of time. Einstein didn't invent it. He just named it. Even as a child, he would lose himself in thought for hours. His parents worried. They thought something was wrong, but he was just drifting, watching dust in sunlight, thinking about light chasing itself, about whether a flash of lightning strikes two places at once if you're standing still versus moving. Spoiler, it depends. And that thought led to special relativity. Let that sink in. A quiet boy, staring out a train window, pondering whether lightning hits simultaneously. That's how it began. One simple question, no calculators, no lab, just curiosity and time. Fringe detail. Some psychologists argue that Einstein may have had a form of temporal synesthesia, seeing colors with numbers, but feeling the flow of time differently than most people. More spatial, more textured. No proof, of course, but the idea is tempting. He often described years not as numbers, but as places. Back in 1905, I was still living in Bern, near the clock tower. You can picture him there, now young, mustached, half smiling, walking under that enormous clock, wondering what time means to a beam of light. And you, now, you're under that same sky, in your own moment, your own fragile ribbon of time, stretching quietly through the dark. Einstein didn't fear death. He feared meaninglessness. Time, he believed, was just one way we made sense of motion, and motion life. Thought, grief, joy was everything. He told his students, time and space are modes by which we think, not conditions in which we live. So maybe, right now, as your thoughts slow and curl into dreams, you're not drifting into sleep. You're slipping into a different mode, one that Einstein spent his whole life exploring, the soft one, the bendy one. So stop chasing the clock, let time melt, like Einstein's tea left cooling on his desk, forgotten while he vanished into thought, because this moment, it's yours, it always was, and it always will be. By now, your body is still, breaths slow, mind weightless, but something curious lingers in the air, a hum, faint, electric, like an old radio warming up, ready to catch some signal from deep space. Einstein loved that hum, not literally though. He did enjoy silence broken only by a violin. But that metaphorical buzz, that tension between the known and the unknown, he lived for it, and tonight you do too, because we're floating into the part of Einstein that wasn't tidy equations or world-shattering theories. It was the part that marveled at beauty. He often said the universe wasn't just understandable, it was elegant. He believed truth had a kind of aesthetic, that good theories felt right, not just logically, but sensibly, like symmetry in a seashell or the satisfying click of a puzzle piece. That's not typical scientist behavior. But then, Einstein wasn't typical. Historians still argue whether this aesthetic instinct made him brilliant or blinded him in his later years. As the quantum revolution surged ahead, chaotic, probabilistic, deeply weird, Einstein resisted. Famously, God does not play dice with the universe, he said, again and again, almost like a mantra. And yes, the scientific community pushed back. Bohr, Heisenberg, Schrödinger, they embraced the randomness. But Einstein couldn't let go of order, of beauty. He wasn't denying the data. He just didn't like what it meant. You can almost picture him in his Princeton office, surrounded by chalk dust and half-empty teacups, muttering to himself in German, Spockhaft Fernwerk in spooky action at a distance. That's what he called quantum entanglement, and it bothered him deeply, because to Einstein, that wasn't how the universe should behave. Particles shouldn't influence each other faster than light. That violated everything he believed in. And yet, there it was, quirky fact. Einstein once collaborated with two younger physicists, Podolsky and Rosen, to publish a paper arguing that quantum mechanics was incomplete. It's now simply known as the EPR paradox. A title that sounds academic but hides the deeper struggle. A mind at war with its own discoveries. Imagine that, the man who reshaped the universe now pacing, irritated, unsettled by the very thing his work made possible. But here's the beautiful part. He never stopped looking, even when the math disagreed with his gut. He kept searching for what he called a unified field theory, a single, graceful equation to link gravity with quantum mechanics. He never found it, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the trying, because Einstein didn't believe the universe was random. He believed it was misunderstood. One fringe anecdote says that near the end of his life, he kept a small notebook beside his bed, filled not with formulas, but with doodle swirls, waves, little symbolic sketches of how particles might curve or loop, like he was drawing dreams, like he was still chasing that last melody. And maybe he was. You know those photos of him with wild white hair, tongue out, eyes dancing? They're cute, sure, but they also reveal something real. That even in old age, Einstein remained playful. He loved jokes, loved puns. Once, when asked for his address by a reporter, he replied, "Try heaven relativity section." He even kept a puppet of himself, made by a fan, on his desk. Said it helped him argue with the other Einstein when he was being stubborn. That sense of humor wasn't just charm, it was armor against the absurdity of a universe he adored but couldn't fully explain. Because, and this may sound strange, Einstein never claimed to have the answers. He only claimed to ask the right questions, and he believed that questions mattered more than certainty. That wonder trumped knowledge. There's a whisper in his writings that maybe, just maybe, he was okay with not knowing. That the beauty of the cosmos lay not in clarity, but in mystery, like music, like dreams. Historians still debate whether Einstein secretly accepted the mechanisms of quantum mechanics near the end. Some say yes, others insist he held out. But one thing is certain, he kept wondering. Even on his deathbed, he asked for his notes. He had more questions, more thoughts to scribble, more lines to chase. And now you're chasing them to dot through the gentle curve of thought, through the hum of uncertainty, through the soft, golden light of curiosity that never quite dims. Because tonight, you're not just drifting into sleep, you're doing what Einstein did best. You're dreaming at the speed of light. You've crossed a quiet threshold now. 1 foot in this world, 1 in Einstein's. Time's moving like warm syrup. Thoughts slow, swaying. And just when you think there's nothing left to learn, you find something. Surprising. Einstein had a secret soft spot. No, not for fame, he found that annoying. Not even for physics, he once called it a stubborn mule of a subject. What truly stole his heart? Imagination, yes, imagination, not intelligence, not precision. He called it the true key to discovery, and not in some throwaway quote you see slapped on mugs and posters either. He meant it, lived it. He believed logic would get you from point A to point B, but imagination, that would take you everywhere. That's why he talked in thought experiments instead of numbers. He asked, what if you rode on a beam of light? What if a man fell off a rooftop and dropped his keys mid-air? These weren't just metaphors, they were methods. His personal spaceship into the unknown. Historians still argue whether this style made him less rigorous or more visionary. After all, some of his colleagues dismissed his ideas as mental gymnastics. But again and again, Einstein proved something profound. Sometimes, a childlike question opens a door no one else even sees. He once said, I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious. Which sounds modest, until you remember that curiosity took him to the edge of the universe and back. And yes, Einstein was intensely curious even about things far outside physics. He read philosophy obsessively, Kant, Hume, Spinoza. He pondered ethics, free will, religion. He even weighed in on socialism, Zionism, nuclear disarmament. He was the rare kind of thinker who didn't build walls between fields, he leaped them. You might not know this, but he also wrote music, or rather, improvised it on violin, often late at night. He never played from sheet music, said it made him feel like a machine. Instead, he let his fingers wander, chasing melodies the way his mind chased theories half planned, half dreamt. That's Einstein's imagination. Not just visual, but musical, emotional, abstract. Quirky tidbit. He once told a friend that if he hadn't been a physicist, he would have been a musician. Not a famous soloist, just someone who played for the joy of it. Someone who listened more than he performed, and he did listen. He was fascinated by people's ideas, especially children. He'd kneel down to their level, ask them strange questions. What color is a shadow? If you could freeze the sky, would birds fall? He wasn't testing them. He meant it. This wasn't performance. It was practice. He genuinely believed adults lost something important when they stopped asking wild, impossible things, and perhaps the greatest mystery Einstein explored wasn't gravity or electromagnetism, but the mind itself. He once wrote, "The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and science." He wasn't afraid of the unknown. He welcomed it like an old friend with a good story and bad coffee. Fringe theory. A few modern neuroscientists think Einstein's Imagination bursts might have been supported by a kind of cognitive quirk, possibly even mild ASD traits, not as a diagnosis, of course, but as a clue to how differently he processed the world. Pattern over prose, metaphor over measurement, wonder over rule. And then there's this. Einstein kept a compass from childhood until death. He'd spin it in idle moments, stare at it like it still had secrets. Maybe it did so now. Picture this, you, lying still, that quiet hum still in the air, and somewhere, just beyond what your brain can quite explain, you can feel the needle. Twitch, you're not lost, you're just being gently redirected. Toward imagination, that's the secret Einstein knew. It's not about having all the answers, it's about loving the questions, letting them curl up next to you, letting them whisper strange things as you fall asleep. What if the moon is just Earth's old wishbone? What if time forgets you when you're not looking? What if dreams are just physics wearing pajamas? So don't search for clarity. Not now. Just drift, and if your thoughts wander off into weird, starry places, well, perfect. You're doing it right. Einstein would be proud. Outside, the wind rustles softly against the shutters. You stir slightly, blanket tugged higher, your body heavy, your mind loose, floating, almost like you're weightless, which brings us to gravity again, but not the physics this time. Tonight, we slip into something stranger. Einstein's relationship with gravity. Not just how he redefined it, but how he felt about it. Emotionally, poetically, almost like it was an old friend or a mischievous trickster. Einstein's theories weren't dry equations locked in journals. They were alive to him. Gravity wasn't. Just a force, it was a story. And in that story, you were never standing still. You were always falling. Every second of your life, your feet are pressing down because the earth is reaching up. Gravity, as Einstein saw it, wasn't pulling you toward the ground. It was pushing you along a curve in space-time, and that's where things get deliciously weird. Einstein loved the idea of free fall. He once said the happiest thought of his life came while sitting in a chair, imagining a man falling off a roof. Not out of cruelty, but because, in that instant of descent, the man would feel weightless. The ground hasn't hit him yet, so for that brief window of time, he's suspended free. Historians still argue whether that eureka moment sparked general relativity or simply deepened it. Either way, the image stuck. Einstein often returned to it. Elevators plummeting in silence, planets suspended in invisible nets, light curving around nothing. The story goes that he once spent 3 straight nights drawing sketches of how gravity might work as a warping of time, not force, but geometry. He'd scribble, erase, mumble in German, then lean back and nap mid-sentence. And when he woke, he'd continue without missing a beat as if his dreams had held his place. One fringe anecdote claims he once solved a tensor equation in his sleep, waking up just long enough to jot down a fragment before drifting off. Again, is it true? Maybe, maybe not. But it feels true, doesn't it? And speaking of tensors, don't worry, we're not going full physics lecture. Just picture a giant rubber sheet stretched out under the night sky. Planets are cannonballs. You're a pebble. You roll toward the cannonball not because it's pulling you, but because the sheet itself curves around it. That curve is gravity. That's Einstein's version. The world isn't flat. It's flexible. It's always bending just slightly beneath your sleepy little head. Now imagine lying on that cosmic sheet, the stars dimming above, and the ground beneath you not solid but softly rippling. You're not standing on Earth. Earth is cradling you, curving space to keep you safe. That's gravity's lullaby, not a law. A hug. Einstein himself sometimes struggled to put it into plain words. He relied on metaphors. Space tells matter how to move. Matter tells space how to curve. He said it often, like a mantra, a bedtime poem for physicists. And while most people feared falling, Einstein loved it. He found peace in that brief suspension. To fall was to feel the truth of relativity. He once told a student that the difference between floating in space and falling in an elevator was only one of location, not physics. It's the same thing, just different scenery. This was more than science. It was a worldview, that everything mass motion, even your own heartbeat, was connected through invisible lines of curvature, that nothing exists in isolation. That too, exist at all is to bend and to be bent. A comforting thought, in a weird way. You were shaped by your universe and you shape it right back. Einstein's writings even suggest he felt something almost sacred in this symmetry. Not religion, exactly. He rejected organized belief, but a reverence, a cosmic harmony. He once wrote, "The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible." Think about that as you drift. The fact that you, a fragile, dreamy bag of stardust, can understand the laws that govern the galaxies. That's not just science. That's intimacy. Another quirky detail. Einstein didn't like climbing stairs. Not because he was lazy, but because it messed with his mental picture of gravity. One cannot think clearly when struggling against a force, he joked. So he preferred flat walks, level sidewalks, minimal interference. He even claimed walking helped him keep his thoughts curved. Whether that's real or just a clever line, historians still debate. What's certain is this: he saw the world differently. And not just because of his theories, because of his dreams, his naps, his quiet, rebellious refusal to live on anyone else's clock. While others built monuments to ambition, he built dreams out of questions. So tonight, lie still. Let yourself fall, not down, but inward, into your mattress, into thought, into space-time, bending gently under the weight of your body and the pull of your mind. Because you're not just lying there, you're riding a ripple, drifting on a curved sheet of gravity. And somewhere, Einstein hair wild, feet bare, probably snoring is doing the same. You're deeper now, past logic, past names, past equations. You've floated into that warm, timeless place where your limbs are heavy, but your thoughts are light. And just when everything seems still, Einstein reappears. This time, not as a physicist, not as a genius, but as a man, an ordinary, restless soul wrapped in the extraordinary . And here's where it gets complicated, because while Einstein's mind soared through galaxies, his personal life, well, it limped along the ground. He once joked that the speed of light was constant, but his marriages definitely weren't. His first wife, Mileva Maric, was a brilliant physicist in her own right, Serbian, sharp, witty, and for a time, the two were inseparable colleagues, co-authors. There's still debate among historians whether Mileva helped craft some of his early work. Letters between them suggest she did. Equations scribbled side by side, discussions that veered from love to light cones in a single breath. But history didn't give her much credit, and Einstein didn't give her much peace. Their marriage eventually collapsed, strained by Einstein's rising fame, endless work, and a tragic secret. Their daughter, Lucelle, born before they married, vanished from the records. Some say she died young, others believe she was adopted. Einstein never spoke of her again. That silence, it speaks louder than any theory. By the time he moved to Berlin, Einstein was already emotionally gone. He laid out cold, clinical terms for staying married, things like "you will not expect intimacy. You will leave my study immediately upon request." Yes, he actually wrote that. It sounds robotic, but it was real and heartbreaking. Eventually, they divorced, and then came Elsa, his cousin, literally, the daughter of his mother's sister. That's a whole tangle of family trees we won't climb tonight, but yes, it happened, and she cared for him deeply, especially as his fame ballooned and the world pressed in. Einstein was grateful, but also distant, always half elsewhere. His letters, warm to colleagues and curious children, were often clipped with Elsa. He was present in mind, but not always in heart. Historians still argue whether he was emotionally cold or just overwhelmed by his own thoughts. Was he bad at relationships, or was he just wired for something else entirely? One quirky detail: Einstein reportedly didn't wear socks, ever, even to fancy events. Said they were a pointless invention. The big toe always poked through anyway. Elsa hated it. So did hotel staff. But he didn't care, because comfort, to him, was not being told what to do. He also hated bureaucracy, forms, schedules. If you ever feel like skipping an email, remember Einstein used to throw his entire mailbag into a drawer, unopened. He said if something mattered, it would find him again. And yet, despite the chaos, the mess, the failed marriages, there was tenderness too. He adored his violin, called it Lena, played her when he was lonely, played when he was joyful, played during debates. Sometimes he'd stop mid-argument and say, "Wait, I need to play this through first," and then batch softly as the blackboard waited. There's something achingly human in that fringe tidbit. Einstein once tried to patent a refrigerator, a quiet, energy-efficient design with no moving parts, co-invented with a colleague. It never quite took off, but it shows something key. He never stopped thinking about ordinary problems, clean energy, safer homes, even as others crowned him genius. He kept tinkering like a basement hobbyist. That duality defined him. His mind lived among the stars, but his heart stumbled through kitchen tables, empty letters, and awkward silences. The same man who explained the curvature of space-time also forgot his wedding anniversary twice. So, what does that mean for you? Maybe it's a kind of freedom. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get everything right. You can be brilliant and broken, soft and scattered. Your gifts can glow even when your days feel uneven. Because Einstein wasn't a flawless hero. He was a restless, complicated, stargazing human, just like you. So now, as your thoughts dim and the silence presses in, imagine this: Einstein at his desk, surrounded by stacks of paper, half-sipped tea, and a violin balanced on the arm of a chair. The world outside bustling, but in here, stillness. A man chasing harmony, even when it escaped him, and now you still breathing, thinking, and maybe, quietly, forgiving yourself for being both wonderful and unfinished. The room around you feels softer now, a little less like a place, a little more like a thought you forgot you were having. You're floating, gently, somewhere between memory and math, drifting further into Einstein's world, but this time, It's not about dreams or drama. Tonight, you find yourself in a laboratory of shadows and stars, because now we touch the one thing Einstein feared more than failure: misuse. You see, when he penned the equation E equals mc, he wasn't thinking of mushroom clouds. He was thinking of elegance, of symmetry, of how a tiny fragment of matter could unleash unimaginable energy. It was poetic, precise, pure. But then came war. The rise of fascism forced Einstein, born a German Jew, to flee Europe, first to Belgium, then to the UK, and finally to America. In 1933, he settled at Princeton. But he never really settled. He watched the world unravel. Friends disappeared, cities darkened, and science, his lifelong refuge, began to shift from discovery to destruction. Historians still argue whether Einstein truly understood the military potential of his equation. But in 1939, convinced by fellow physicist Leo Szilard, he signed a letter to President Roosevelt. That letter warned the US that Germany might be building an atomic bomb and urged America to act first. The Manhattan Project was born. Einstein never worked on it. He wasn't invited. Too radical, too unpredictable, and, truth be told, too famous. He posed a security risk. But his name was enough. His equation, etched in ink, had lit the fuse. And when Hiroshima and Nagasaki vanished under twin flashes, Einstein wept. He reportedly said, "If I had known, I would have become a watchmaker, a man obsessed with time, wishing it could be." Rewound, quirky fact. After the bombings, he spent the rest of his life advocating for peace. He co-founded the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists, wrote letters, gave interviews, pleaded for global cooperation. His soft, tired voice echoing in rooms where no one quite listened. And yet he kept going. Even as the Cold War chilled the world, he spoke out against nationalism, racism, nuclear arms, called patriotism an infantile disease, warned that science without ethics was a sword with no handle. You'd think, after all that, he'd grow bitter. But no, he grew quieter. He turned inward, returned to his thought experiments, now tinged with sadness. He searched, still, for unity, single thread to bind the cosmos, not to build bombs, just to understand. Fringe tidbit. Einstein once corresponded with a teenage girl who asked, "Do scientists pray?" His answer was tender, careful. He wrote, "Everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man, not God, per se, but wonder, awe." That was his religion. He called it cosmic religion, a faith not in dogma, but in mystery, in harmony, in the poetry of physics and the silence between the stars. And now you lie in that silence, feeling the weight of what one mind can do. It's strange, isn't it, how the same hand that wrote down light's velocity also helped shake the world apart. Not out of malice, out of fear, out of duty, out of the impossible tug between ethics and urgency. So where does that leave you? Maybe with a gentle reminder, genius does not guarantee foresight. Even the brightest minds can stumble in the dark. And sometimes a brilliant idea taken out of context can cast a very long shadow. But you're not here to fear. You're here to reflect, to wonder how a man who played Bach in candlelight also helped birth the nuclear age. To feel that tension, not to solve it, but to sit with it, quietly, like Einstein did, because answers are heavy things. And tonight, you don't need answers. You need peace, So breathe. Let the weight lift. Let your mind soften like the curve of space and listen somewhere. Faintly you can almost hear it. A violin playing through the dusk, trying to outlast the echo of a bomb, trying to remember the melody of what came before. By now, your body barely remembers what tension feels like. Your fingers don't twitch. Your thoughts have turned to shadows, soft and slow. You're drifting with Einstein, not through time or space, but something gentler, his final frontier. Simplicity. It's odd, isn't it? A man who revolutionized physics, who flipped Newton on his head and sketched blueprints for black holes, spent his last decades chasing something achingly simple, a unifying theory, a cosmic harmony that could explain everything with one elegant equation. Historians still argue whether this was genius or folly. The world had moved on to quantum mechanics, particle accelerators, wave functions that refused to sit still. But Einstein didn't trust quantum physics. God, he famously said, does not play dice with the universe. Most of the scientific community said, actually, he does. Probability had become the law, but Einstein pushed back. For him, nature had to make sense. It had to follow rules, quiet, smooth, Knowable. And so, in his office at Princeton, surrounded by cluttered desks and yellowed notes, Einstein hunted his white whale, the unified field theory, a theory to marry gravity and electromagnetism, to stitch the universe together in a single fabric. He filled notebooks with squiggles, lines, symbols that looked like nervous poetry, but the pieces never quite fit. And yet, every morning, he rose, shuffled down the hall in his slippers, scribbled, erased, scribbled again. He never finished it, but he never gave up. Quirky detail. Einstein had a closet full of the same grey suits. Same cut, same fabric, no variation. Why? Because he didn't want to waste brainpower choosing what to wear. Fashion, to him, was clutter. And clutter, he believed, blocked clarity. He also hated shaving. Said it was a waste of a good morning. So, he grew out his hair, let his mustache drift into white clouds, and looked more and more like a kindly time traveler who'd gotten lost in the wrong century. He wasn't eccentric for the sake of it. He was focused, devoted to simplicity. In every form, and simplicity, for Einstein, wasn't about less. It was about depth. He once said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. A perfect line. Elegant, like his best ideas. The ones that didn't try to impress, just worked. He believed the universe whispered, not shouted, and that if you listened long enough, its secrets would come not in a boom, but in a murmur. Fringe. Theory. Some modern physicists think Einstein was too devoted to elegance, that he ignored the chaotic, probabilistic beauty of quantum mechanics because it offended his sense of order. Maybe, or maybe he was just playing a longer game one. We still don't understand. Either way, he wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing meaning. One scholar described it like this: Einstein wasn't trying to explain the world. He was trying to understand why it exists at all. There's something almost spiritual in that. Not religious, not dogmatic, just wonder, the kind you feel when a snowflake lands on your sleeve and doesn't melt, when your heart slows in a quiet room, when the stars outside your window flicker like static on an old radio. That's where Einstein lived. Not in the headlines, not in the labs, but in the pause between thoughts. He was a man who loved stillness, who craved it, who found in silence the most important questions, and you, now, are slipping into that same stillness. No alarms, no tasks, just your breath, soft and regular. Your thoughts folding like origami into smaller and smaller shapes, until nothing remains but the sense that this moment, this quiet means something, even if you don't know what, even if you never will. That's okay. Einstein didn't either, but he searched anyway, not because he thought he'd solve it all, but because he believed the search was worth it. So let go. Let your mind wander. If it loops, let it loop. If it drifts, let it drift. Simplicity isn't emptiness, it's focus, and right now, your only focus is rest. Picture him, old now, a little stooped, that wild hair more cloud than curls, sitting by a window, a soft breeze rustling his papers, and a pencil balanced behind his ear. He smiles nothing, at everything, because sometimes knowing less feels more complete. You're not quite here anymore, not entirely. You're hovering where the air is thick with memory and dreams, and Einstein too is fading, not vanishing, no, just becoming softer, like chalk dust still swirling on a blackboard long after the professor's gone. We're nearing the end, and fittingly, this is where Einstein's story too begins to wind down. It's April 1955. Einstein is 76 years old. He's lived through 2 world wars, won the Nobel Prize, fled the Nazis, watched his own theory reshape the entire map of human fear. His hair is white, thinner now. His steps are slow, but his mind's still humming. Always humming. He's in Princeton Hospital. Abdominal aortic aneurysm, bleeding inside, quietly. The doctors suggest surgery. He refuses. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially, he says. I have done my share. It is time to go. And just like that, he lets the universe take him back. Fringe fact, his final words are lost. He spoke them in German, and the nurse attending didn't understand the language. Imagine that, the last thoughts of the most famous mind of the 20th century whispered into the air. Never recorded, never translated. Some part of you probably wants to know what he said, but maybe not knowing is the point. Historians still argue over what Einstein meant to the world. A scientist, a humanist, a symbol, a warning. He was all of these, and none of them, because the truth is he wasn't trying to be anything. He just was. A man who liked sailing, but never learned to swim, a thinker who couldn't drive, a genius who forgot to wear socks and loved ice cream, even as he rewrote the structure of reality, and now a quirky twist to the story, one that feels a little eerie. After Einstein's death, his brain was removed without permission. Dr. Thomas Harvey, the pathologist on duty, took it, sliced it, preserved it in jars, shipped fragments to researchers around the world. He said it was for science, to understand genius, but many question that. Was it reverence, curiosity, or just obsession? Decades later, pieces of Einstein's brain still travel the globe, housed in museums, tucked in labs, stained on slides. It's unsettling, but strangely poetic, as if even in death, his mind refused to sit still. One study found he had more glial cells in the parts of the brain responsible for mathematical thought. Others found nothing special at all, just a brain, just tissue, and maybe that's the deeper truth. He wasn't a superhuman. He wasn't magic. He was just a man, just like you, full of questions, full of contradictions, afraid, sometimes, wrong, often, but brave enough to think, to wonder, to keep chasing patterns in the chaos. The world, of course, didn't forget him. His face, frozen in black and white photos, became shorthand for brilliance. Posters, statues, memes, crazy hair equals genius. The math simplified into merchandise. But beneath the image was someone softer, more fragile. He once wrote, "Strange is our situation here upon earth. Each of us comes for a short visit. For what purpose he knows not." And maybe that's the closest thing to an answer we'll get. You're here. Briefly, just like him. You blink into existence. You learn, you fail, you hope. You stare at the stars. You worry about rent. You forget birthdays. You laugh at the wrong time. You tell someone you love them too late. You fall asleep wondering about black holes and whether you left the oven on. And somehow, it's all part of the same equation. So as the hospital fades from your mind and Einstein's ghost tucks itself back into the folds of time, you feel something calm settle into your chest. Not knowledge, not certainty, just acceptance of everything, of not knowing, of trying anyway, of being small in a big, spinning place, and thinking, okay, I can live with that. Now let your eyes close a little heavier. Let your thoughts unravel gently. You've almost made it. And somewhere, maybe, that missing sentence, the one lost in German on Einstein's final breath, floats quietly, just beyond reach, and maybe that's exactly where it belongs. You breathe slower now. Your limbs are leaden but warm. The room around you could be your own, or some pocket of space-time folded into stillness. There's no real distinction anymore between your thoughts and the narrative Einstein has become. Part of your mental wallpaper, a quiet presence leaning in the corner, smiling with that familiar mix of mischief and melancholy. And now we go even further from equations. Deeper into the emotional terrain Einstein kept mostly hidden, his inner life, the scientist, the rebel, the icon, yes. But beneath all that, he was a man who felt deeply, who grieved, who loved awkwardly, who carried guilt like an invisible backpack. Let's start with family. His first marriage was to Maleva Marika, brilliant physicist. In her own right, one of the few women at the Zurich Polytechnic. Some historians believe she even helped with his early work on relativity, though the extent remains debated. What's not debated? Their relationship unraveled. Slowly, bitterly. He wrote cold letters, drafted a list of conditions she must accept. If they were to remain together, things like you will expect no intimacy from me, and you must stop talking to me if I request it. Oof. Not exactly romantic. Eventually, they divorced. Maleva was left behind in Zurich, raising their 2 sons. The elder, Hans Albert, became an engineer. The younger, Edward, brilliant, sensitive, and later diagnosed with schizophrenia. Institutionalized for much of his adult life, Einstein rarely visited. Historians still argue whether this was emotional avoidance, personal torment, or the callous side of genius. Maybe all three. He later remarried his cousin, Elsa. Their relationship was calmer, but not exactly passionate. More companionship than fire. And still, Einstein had affairs. Letters reveal flirtations, sometimes multiple at once. It's messy, human. You don't have to admire it, but it's part of him. Fringe fact. One of his letters reveals that he once mused about falling in love with a Russian spy. Or maybe she wasn't a spy. Or maybe he made it up. He had a way of wrapping truth in riddles, especially when it came to his personal life. But if there's one constant thread in his emotional world, it was isolation. Even when surrounded by admirers, Einstein always felt apart, like the universe was a party he'd shown up to too early. Still holding the invitation, he once wrote, "I am a horse for a single harness, not cut out for tandem or teamwork." A beautiful way of saying, I'm built to be alone. And yet he longed for connection, with people, yes, but more deeply with the cosmos, with something bigger than himself. That's why he wandered in the woods near Princeton, why he played Mozart while scribbling in margins, why he told jokes to children and answered fan letters from teenagers with more warmth than he gave world leaders. Because under the chalkboards and the headlines, Einstein was perhaps above all a seeker, not of fame, not of wealth, but of truth in its softest, quietest form. And maybe that's the lesson he never quite articulated, but lived with every breath, that to wonder is enough. You don't have to solve it all. You don't need to unify the fields or finish the formula. You just need to keep looking, keep asking, keep feeling the pull of the stars on your thoughts and letting your imagination slip just slightly out of orbit, because that is what makes you alive. So rest easy now. You've walked through his memories, drifted across time, felt the sting of regret, the warmth of violin strings, the cool clarity of light split by a prism. You've seen his world, not just the genius, but the man. The boy who dreamed of riding a beam of light. The elder who whispered to the void and hoped someone was listening. You are listening, and now you're nearly at the end of the trail. The equations have faded, the chalkboard is clean, the violin is silent, and Einstein, at last, has stepped out of the spotlight, back into the stars. You don't need to chase him anymore. You just need to rest. Here, at last, the story exhales. You've traveled far tonight, from a curious little boy staring at compasses to an old man brushing snow off his shoulders on a quiet walk in Princeton. You've drifted through breakthroughs, heartbreaks, dinner table, sketches of space-time, and the stubborn ache of a life lived both in public and in mystery. And now, in this final stretch, we don't race, we wander. Einstein, by this point in our tale, no longer belongs to himself. He's a symbol, a silhouette. That face hair like an electrical storm, mustache drooping like an old philosopher's sigh has become shorthand for genius. People hang posters of him next to lava lamps and vinyl records, tattoo his formulas on their forearms, quote him correctly, or not, everything from creativity to cats. And yet, if you stripped all that away, no statues, no Nobel, no relativity, what would you have left? Just this, a man who never stopped wondering. He once said, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." Imagine that. The man whose ideas bent time itself, who cracked the speed of light open like an egg and peeked inside. Think he was extraordinary. He just kept asking questions, even when he was wrong, even when nobody agreed, even when his hands shook from age and he had to hold the pen with both fingers. He scribbled out the universe like a child tracing constellations on a fogged-up window. And maybe, deep down, that's the kind of genius we need more of. Not the myth, not the cold brilliance, but the warm, stubborn dreamer who knew how to sit with wonder, who knew that mystery wasn't failure, it was the invitation. One last quirky detail. Einstein's desk, still as he left it, was photographed the day he died. Papers stacked, notes scattered, a pipe resting beside his latest scribbles. Not tidy, not ceremonial, just lived in, honest, human. The Princeton Institute eventually cleaned it up. But for a while, it sat untouched. Like time itself held its breath. Historians still argue whether Einstein's unified field theory was a waste of his final years. But the question misses the point. He didn't chase answers because he needed to win. He chased them because the chase itself was beautiful. Because searching is sacred. Even now, with your eyes heavy, your thoughts barely forming, you understand this in your bones. You don't need to solve Einstein. You just need to carry his rhythm. One foot in the known, one in the unknown, one ear tuned to music, the other to silence, one hand holding the compass, and the other tracing stars. As we close, let's not seal him in marble. Let's not freeze him in formulas. Let him remain what he was, a question, walking, a laugh, echoing through a lecture hall, a soft hum of violin, drifting over the snow, and you, now resting, you followed the light beam long enough for tonight. Let the world outside fade. Let clocks stop ticking. Let even time bend a little. Because here, in the quiet curve of sleep, you found something Einstein sought his whole life, stillness, and now, to bring you home. Your breath has slowed. The room is still. The air feels like warm cotton, wrapped gently around your thoughts. You've walked alongside a legend, not just in facts or dates, but in feeling. You've felt his wonder, his doubt, his spark, and now, as your eyes close fully, let that spark dim just a little. Not extinguished, just softened, like the last glow of a candle before morning. There's no need to think anymore. No more chasing photons or peeking behind reality's curtain. Just let your body sink into the mattress. Let gravity hold you like an old friend. Imagine yourself drifting in space, not cold or alone, just peaceful, floating above the curve of the earth, no sound but the steady whisper of your breath, stars stretching out in all directions, the soft hum of the cosmos pulsing gently like a lullaby. You don't need to understand it. You don't need to explain it. Just be in it. You are not small here. You are not lost. You are part of the equation. One quiet variable in a universe that sings in probabilities and dreams. And in this moment, that's more than enough. So rest now. Let the math fade. Let the dreams begin. And if, by chance, you start to ride a beam of light across the night sky, hold on too tight. Einstein would tell you, it's all part of the ride. Good night.